yeah, there's risk in traveling, there's risk in starting a business, there's risk in dating, there's risk in doing anything new. But what is the risk of not doing anything new?
Having kids are the ultimate ball and chain. I mean, as parents, it's impossible to take big risks or go on new adventures. And if you're living the Southern California dream with a Tesla, a custom YouTube studio, and grandparents down the street, you'd be bat crazy to walk away from it all. Especially to a place where things don't run as smoothly.
Every kind of problem that you encounter just becomes another opportunity to connect to people, to have a laugh, to discover something new about yourself. Like, you really find these really beautiful moments in the moments of difficulty.
That's Tiago, Forte, and Lauren Valdez, the co-founders of Forte Labs, best known for the Building a Second Brain productivity framework. They packed up and moved their young family to Mexico, and we discuss the significant cultural attitudes towards work, how surrendering into deep uncertainty is still possible as a parent, and how they're building community in a new country. Let's jump in.
I'm selfishly interested in this conversation because one of our family values is adventure. And I feel like as our kids get older, it's just harder to have adventure as a family. But I want to just zoom you out. From an outsider's perspective, you guys had the perfect setup, right? You were in a lovely community in Long Beach, like up and coming neighborhood. You owned your house. You had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into this incredible YouTube studio. Tesla, Lauren's family lives around, like every time I went to your house, one of your family members was there, literally every single time. Tiago's family down the road in Orange County. Your kids are quite young. And it just seemed like you had the thing, which that everyone is like grinding, aspiring to have. And you had done it at, a relatively young age and done it in your own unique way. And then I don't know, I wouldn't say you blew it up, but you did walk away from it. Can you like situate us maybe like before the move? Like, what were you striving to build as a family?
I think we have to go a little bit further back for a moment, because people who like hear this, that we just did this, it sounds so extreme, but Tiago and I have both spent an incredible amount of time abroad, living abroad. Tiago's family grew up partially between Brazil and the US with his Brazilian mom. And I grew up traveling a ton after I went to college and have lived abroad a bunch. And those experiences have always been the most meaningful to my growth. And in our relationship, before we were even married, like, we had this value of wanting to live abroad with our children. And so before we even got married, that was a thing we wanted to create. And so we've set up our lifestyle for that. It wasn't like this off the cuff moment. It was like something that's always been on the back burner for our entire decade plus long relationship. And so we knew there would be a time in which we did this with our kids. It was more about when would it work for like the kids' age and where our families were at and where we were at professionally. But we always knew at some point we are going to go live abroad with our kids.
Yeah, that's such a good point. This was not, we did kind of blow up our lives, but it was the furthest thing from a, slapdash, just spontaneous sort of rage quitting of, suburban California life. I mean, there's just these 2 months that we've been here, I've noticed we've had to rely on skills and assets and like prior experience that go back like so many years.
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video.
I mean, the fact that we've lived in Mexico before, we lived, the two of us, in Mexico City for a whole year. That was like a year-long trial run. We're not in Mexico City now. We're nearby, but it's like we had a whole year trial run to figure out so many things about ourselves and so many things about the life we wanted to live. And so it was something we've been kind of plotting and preparing for. Even things like in the business, the fact that we shut down cohort-based courses about a year ago. There were various motivations for that, but one of them was I realized to live in small town Mexico, you cannot rely on high speed, always on internet access. You just can't. The power goes on probably there, or the power goes off probably once a week here, which means I can't be on a Zoom call with hundreds of people that have each paid, a lot of money. And so the whole model of cohort based courses, which was our main product, even just a year and a half ago, had to go away. And we've had to replace it with other sources that were asynchronous or that could be done, in a less technologically reliable environment.
Yeah. I'm curious about the you had been putting in the steps, and you mentioned some on the business side, the mindset. As someone, and you both know this about me, and the listeners know this, like, to me, the freedom is in being asset light. So longtime renter, I joke that, like we bought our car during COVID, but it's like we lease our car for all intents and purposes. We still have the same, my kids are 10 and 7 now. We still have the same shitty furniture that like they've spilt like 1,000 things on. And to us, that is like the ultimate freedom, that like, if someone said you have to throw away your couch, we'd be like, cool, it's 10 years too late. Right. And that's the freedom for us if we were to ever go on some adventure. And we fantasize about doing this at some point. And I will bring this back to your kids' age at some point. But it seemed like you had laid down firmer roots, both like in buying a home. I think often about your YouTube studio, mostly because I'm jealous. And then also just like, I know how much I've been in it. I know how complex that is and how expensive that is. And so what are other kind of frames and steps or decisions or non-decisions that you had maybe since you became parents, I don't know, in the semi-recent time frame that were with this goal in mind of moving?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did the house minivan thing, and that was an incredible time period, 4 years of like being our most rooted and near our family. And that happened during the pandemic. Prior to that, we were living in Mexico. And prior to that, we were living in the Bay Area. So this was our first time living near our family, and it was an incredible time. And we were seeing this as temporary, like, let's go do 2 years and come back. And so part of us is like seeing the ways we can kind of be in between these adventures and home life. And so part of our privilege is our family. And so like my sister and her fiance are renting our house from us, which made everything super simple. And we're giving them a great deal in exchange for us being able to stay there when we come home and keeping all of our stuff there, which is awesome. So we have like a guest room when we go home and get to be in our house. And it feels really comfortable, which makes it easy for us to go back to California and spend 2 weeks with our family. And we're planning on doing that every few months so that we can keep that relationship with our family like tight knit while we have our kids abroad. And Mexico is Mexico makes it very easy to do that because it's not that far away. Time zone is pretty similar. And I also have like Mexican family. So it's like, it's easy for us to kind of feel like we can go between these two cultures, and we set things up to keep it simple for us to be able to move in between these spaces.
Yeah. I love that. Tiago, you were going to say?
Yeah. I feel like there's this interesting thing where there's a lot more options. There's a lot more shades of gray in your lifestyle than people realize.
Yes.
It's not like you are permanently fixed to the ground in suburban wherever in the US and you can't go anywhere, or opposite extreme, you're a jungle hopping digital nomad. Like when we lived in Mexico City for all of 2019, we came back, we saw our family almost every month. We saw them, and in some ways the quality time was actually better, because when we were coming back home, it was like, oh, Tiago and Lauren are in town, let's like make time for them. Whereas when we live 45 minutes away, it would just be like a dinner, just like a standard dinner. And so we thought, wow, we can actually like kind of split the difference. We can have the best of both worlds in a lot of different ways. This time around, it's a little bit different. We can't go home every month because it's so much harder to get home. A, because we have 2 kids, and B, because we live like 2 or 3 hours away from the airport in Mexico. So suddenly it got quite a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But then there's other things that come into play. Like when we do go home, we're going to stay 2 weeks or longer, right? Which we can now do because we have our own home. Or another thing is like we saw a bunch of houses here in the small town where we live, which is called Valle Del Bravo. And we actually opted for the least expensive of all of them. Partly because it was still the nicest and the best, but also partly because there's a guest house, which means like a nice little guest house on the property, which means we can have our family members and friends come out and just stay with us right here, which makes that so much easier. So it's less like choosing from a fixed menu of options like A, B, or A, B, C, or D. And it's more just like these little trade-offs and little almost like design. You can design your lifestyle in all these little minute ways that makes certain things easier or harder or more possible or less possible.
I love that. And one of the things that Lauren said is that, people always like with you renting your house to your siblings, right? It's a win-win for everyone, right? You get the comfort of like the best tenant ever. They get a below market rate. You get the flexibility to visit. And I think that, what I hear in that comment, because, having blown up my life in a different way, is that the question people always ask, and maybe it was even implied in my question, is what can go wrong, right? And what I'm hearing in both of your answers, and I feel so grateful. I think this is one of the best parts of entrepreneurship and like doing something different, is that I get to face the question, what can go right? Right. And it's hard to like sit at your desk and, I'll come back to something that you wrote about this kind of like these cultures, like the American culture laced in fear. But I feel like, the scarcity mindset, however you want to fight or flight, however you want to program it, everyone's sitting, if you're a homeowner that wants to take a break, all you're thinking is like, man, the worst tenant ever, property taxes are going to go up, they're going to trash my place. I'm not going to be able to fix a, leaky sink from, Spain or wherever you choose to move. And then there's an infinite amount of possibilities there too. And if you just let yourself consider them, it can really reshape things. And I can't even tell you the number of like, how could this go? I mean, like the most simple one is like, for me, it's like, how can this go right? Which again, I couldn't have planned it, but because I've been such a diligent investor in the stock market, so I was just going to keep being a stock market investor. The last 10 years, the stock market has gone up 4 times. So like, even though it's been one of my, lower income producing years, my wealth has gone up significantly. I couldn't have planned that, but I just stuck to the thing that I'm used to doing, that I would have done anyway. And, if I had sat there thinking about leaving and been like, what happens if the stock market goes down 50? And I did do this. Like, what happens if the stock market Never in my mind did I was like, what happens if the stock market goes up 500%?
So true.
And you put yourself, it's not, again, I don't want people to think that these things are guaranteed, but there's so many more of them out there than you realize if you're just sitting there pondering the downside.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point. And something I want to add to it too is like, there are real downsides to the status quo. And I feel like people never take this into account. There's risk in traveling, there's risk in starting a business, there's risk in dating, there's risk in doing anything new. But what is the risk of not doing anything new? Right? So it's like, what is the risk? What is the downside? What is the negative impact? And it's probably less visible. It's probably maybe underneath the surface. It's not this like big, overwhelming, attention grabbing crisis. And yet it's there right beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Like actually when we decided to make this move, I had this like set of like reasons. And as we're here, I'm discovering there were other reasons. There's like subconscious reasons. And one of them is I realized pretty recently that one of the reasons I wanted to make this move is I'm slowly coming to realize how little control of my children and their future I have as a father. And this is the period where we have the most control.
Yeah.
Like we control almost every aspect of their lives. And yet their personality is not under our control. A lot of their interests, what they're attracted to, what they're interested in. And so it's like, It's like, it's almost like moving to Mexico was one decision that I could make one time to
Mhm.
not have to make a whole series of other decisions or control a whole bunch of other things. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. Like, I had this thought that every parent has, you know, all the time. I would like my family to be more mindful,
Mhm.
right? To be less device centric, less technology centric, less stressed, all those things. Well, I cannot, and I do not want to spend every minute of every day policing that. Oh,
Yep.
get off your phone, turn off that TV. Oh, don't be in such a hurry. Oh, meditate, like all these things. But by just yanking us out of that context and
Mhm.
dropping the family into a different place, there's many things about being here that just naturally, as a byproduct, make us more mindful. The fact
Yeah.
that the electricity goes out sometimes for a day or two at a time. I'm like, when it happens, part of me is like, yes, family quality time.
Totally.
We
Totally.
we did I was alone with the kids last weekend while Tiago was traveling, and we didn't have internet the whole weekend because the
Wow.
owner forgot to pay the bill and forgot to tell me I was supposed to go to like an OXXO and like pay the bill. So we
Yes.
had no internet for like, so no TV, nothing for 48 hours, and it tested like all my creativity as well as
Yeah.
all my like nervous system regulation techniques to parent solo for a weekend, like through that, like without being able to give myself breaks with like, watch some TV while I take a break. It was a great learning experience for all of us.
I love that. Hey, Razi, there was a blackout in New York City in, I think, 2005. So I was 23 years old, and there was no power in all of New York City for, I think, 48 hours. Can you imagine that? And so we were like a bunch of, dumb 25-year-olds, and we just like bought a bottle of vodka and played Monopoly with candles. Like it was just, and everyone in New York, if you were in New York during the blackout, everyone talks about it like it was this unique moment in time that you kind of yearn for. And it's just funny that, it's like a city with 9 million people that was like everyone was having exactly what you just described. I wanted to ask you, did your parents have any thoughts about the move, like young grandkids?
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part in our decision making is we are super close with our family and we
Yeah.
come from large families. I'm one of five, Tiago's one of four. And my grandparents left Mexico under conditions of extreme poverty and for the better life opportunities of America. So when they hear I'm moving back to Mexico, they're like, what? Why? And they have fear. I feel like my Mexican family is more afraid of me living abroad than probably your parents would be. Because they have these like fear mindsets about
Yeah.
Mexico, but they also left pretty intense conditions of
Yeah.
Mexico versus like the conditions we get to inhabit now. And I think a lot about kind of that intergenerational trauma and what I get to heal, being able to reconnect my heritage and culture with Mexico and a vibrant, beautiful Mexico. Like when I was young, when we would go visit my family in Mexico, there were not toilets. There was like an outhouse you'd have to go use outside. And so I think my family's perspective is like that kind of Mexico. And I remember when I went to Mexico City for the first time in my mid 20s, it was like the beauty of Mexican culture and cuisine and architecture and museums and seeing like there's this whole beautiful, amazing culture that in media in the US, I haven't always gotten
Yeah.
that viewpoint of like, here's how Mexico is this amazing, vibrant, beautiful place. And my family hasn't always seen that side. And I get to be here experiencing it. And I feel immense privilege to be here with that kind of privilege where I could live that kind of lifestyle in Mexico. And I feel like I get to like heal that connection with Mexico, and my family gets to come visit me and see the amazing lifestyle we have here. And part of a lot of the kind of personal journey Tiago and I go through is going through these hard conversations and trying to heal these things with our parents and explain like what we're up to. It's probably not as crazy as like my parents felt so nervous for me when I moved to Brazil by myself on a Fulbright fellowship, and they had a lot of fear related to that. But I've now moved abroad many times in my adulthood, so they're kind of used to that.
Mm.
But with leaving the kids, that was really hard for all of us. And we've tried to do as much as we can to keep those connections strong. Like we want to come home and stay for 2 weeks at a time every like 3 months is kind of like the cadence we're doing. And then right now we're working on getting my family to come for Thanksgiving. So we're like, do your Thanksgiving here. So we're really trying to like fit that in as much as we can. And Tiago, you can speak about your family because your family's had a different experience with living abroad.
Yeah, my parents took us abroad to Brazil when I'm the oldest. I was 14. My siblings were 11, 8, and 5.
Wow.
And it was just a year, just 12 months. Actually, it's kind of funny. It was such a close parallel to what we're doing here. In a way, I think I semi-consciously just recreated the exact same scenario. Like we are in a mountain town that's touristy, but also kind of cool to live in. That's about 2 hours outside of a major city. There it was Sao Paulo. Here it's Mexico City. Even like the aesthetics of the place, the geography of it, the school that we go to, it's all super similar. And so I had such a clear template for what it looked like. Right. This is how you prepare to leave. This is what it looks like to leave. This is the kind of place you look for, the criteria, like the whole scenario. I had a template, which I really see as such a huge advantage. So many people we talk to are in a position where they absolutely could, and I feel like should go abroad. But because their parents didn't do it, and in some cases they don't know anyone else that has done it, it's so hard to entertain a possibility for your life that you don't know anyone who has done that.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I thank you guys for having this conversation. And again, it's somewhat selfish, but and you see that with entrepreneurship too, and the internet creator world, right? There was no template for that when you and I started, right? It was just the term influencer didn't even exist when we started our online journeys. So, so your parents, were they like, cool, like you're taking a page? They're like, see you in a year, see you in 2 years.
No, not cool at all. My family was very upset, and we kind of like we wanted to ease them into it. So we always knew we would do this at a certain point, and then we kind of I think when we first had kids, we were like 2024 would be a good time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then life got in, and we're like, no, that's too soon. And then we were on a trip to Mexico City. Tiago speaking at a conference earlier this year. And Tiago met someone there who's now a good friend of ours. And Tiago shared, we want to move to Mexico one day. And this was a guy, a Mexican guy who lived in this town. And he was like, come visit my town. And so he invited us out here a couple days after the conference, and we visited. He showed us around. We're like, this is an awesome place. Like, this would be an ideal place to move our family. And so we just brainstormed about the possibility of coming in 2025. So we had this like beautiful vision for it. It seemed like it would work out well with the kids' ages. Like our son's in preschool, our daughter's, almost 2. So we're like, it would be a good time before they're too into school. And then we have like a year to kind of plan out, what do we do with the house? What do we do with like all our, like figure all the logistics out and get our family used to the idea. So we kind of shared that idea and that vision with the family. Tiago wrote a long blog post about it. And then we ended up moving 6 months after that visit to Mexico, a whole year faster than we said we were going to.
And by the way, whether for you, Kay, or someone listening, I have some rationale why you should go and you should go sooner than you think. You want to hear it?
Yes, please.
So there's a few reasons. One, there's 3, I think. The first is, and this was a surprise to us, the minute you decide you're for sure going, everything in your life, it's kind of like once you made the decision to leave, everything is in like standby mode.
It's like limbo.
Everything is in limbo. That's what it is. From the moment you make that decision. So suddenly you don't feel as motivated to even like, I feel terrible saying this, but invest in friendships because you're leaving. You don't feel like getting to know the area because you're leaving. You don't feel like making investments in your home, your studio, your car, your anything because you're leaving. And so suddenly, in a weird way, the quality of your present life starts to go down as soon as it's almost like your future is now not in that place. And therefore the time horizon of investment has shortened. And so originally—
That's why you canceled our group hang at the Getty, right?
Dude, that's so true. But
I'm not offended. I get it.
I mean, it was part of it. So initially we decided 18 months. We were like, let's like 18 months, that will give us plenty of runway. But then when everything became in limbo, we pulled that forward quite a lot.
Meaning like, I don't want to be in limbo for 18 months. It's just a bad way to exist.
Yeah. It's not exactly. It's not a nice way to exist.
Like we stopped. I remember like there was things I needed for the house, but I didn't want to buy them. I was like, I don't want to buy that because then I have to get rid of it. And so, yeah, it was like this weird like limbo space. But I think we were also really trying to think through like our relationships and the kids' schooling. And our son he was going to do a second year of preschool because he started when he was like turning 3. So he's going to have to do another year of preschool and then TK and then kindergarten. And I was like, he's going to be at the same exact preschool doing the same exact thing. That didn't feel great. And then they're also in their prime language learning years. And
that's my framework that I'm laying out.
Oh, well, so then wait.
I had 3 reasons. So I said 1. Let me say the other 2.
Okay, go ahead. Say your other 2.
That's the second one. Is your kid? So I actually read a paper. I don't usually base life decisions based on scientific papers, but this one was trying to identify what is actually the key language learning years. And I've always heard the folk wisdom that it's just like as they're kids, just kids in general, right? Which is true, but more specifically, it's so early. It's like before they're even 1 year old. This paper just explained their brain is changing shape to fit the language that they're immersed in before they're 1, before they can even say anything.
Yeah.
And so I was like, holy crap. Like if the whole purpose of this trip is to give them the advantage of language, which it really is, you basically can't go too soon. As soon as they're born, you want to start thinking about it. That's the second reason. And then the third one is there's a window of opportunity. You know, like we were thinking in our own lives, how many things had to be true for us to make this leap? You know, something as simple as you have a parent that's sick. Like that might be one detail that's a big detail that that makes it impossible for you to leave. Or you get sick, or you get injured, or one of your kids has a health issue, or your finances take a downturn, or the economy takes a downturn, or the political, like there's like probably dozens of different factors that have to line up. So if you can go now, if you happen to be able to go now, you are probably within a golden window of some kind, and therefore you should go. Those are my rationale for.
I love it. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Lauren? Because I know you.
I was just going to do it in more of a storytelling way, Tiago, in a framework way.
Tell the story.
I mean, we were driving in our car. We were coming back from like a weekend visiting our brother and sister-in-law, and we were just like kind of talking about that limbo space. And it was just like the only reason we are going in 18 months versus now is that our families can't handle it. And we can't handle our families being upset. And we're like, we kind of just got to rip the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
And part of that was like, hey, our parents are in good health right now. And I can imagine, I've lost my dad. And so like, I can imagine a place where if our family members are not in a good place, we will not want to be far away. Yeah. And so that kind of all combined, and we knew we could be with their being upset about it. We're like, we can work through that together with our families, and we have. And so we have some like policies we're kind of putting in place in terms of what we value. Like the house we're renting, there's all kinds of stuff I would love to do with it and buy new things for it and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I'm not doing that because I have other values. Like, I am flying in my godmother, who's like, she's my secondary mother, next week when the kids are out of school. So I bought her a flight so she could come out and be with us when the kids have their week off school, so we can do like a little vacation and all that kind of stuff. And I'd rather spend my money on that than like buying, I don't know, a more convenient piece of furniture for the house here that's temporal. So really like kind of the agreements we've made with our family are like, we're going to come back often. We're FaceTiming all the time. And we are going to take advantage of every opportunity for us to get together in person.
And I love that, you know, maybe at the end of the day, it's actually quite a simple thing. You've implied it and said it directly a few times, is that living in alignment with your values. And I think that that's hard enough look, I mean, I'm in the world of self-improvement and all that. Like, if you ask me to detail like on a piece of paper what my values are, I can't do it. I don't do those types of exercises. I do think intuitively over time, I've come to live more like in line with my values, but that's hard for an individual to do that. And then to do it with a family, that means you have to do it jointly, with your spouse and potentially your kids, depending on their age. Like your kids are part of the discussion, even if they're not saying things. And it's such a simple thing, right? It's like a simple concept, right? Like, what are your values as a family? And do you strive to, match your money, your spending, your activities to those values? But it's so complicated. Like it's like, it's not that simple, but at the same time, and one thing that's always impressed me about the two of you is that you are very intentional about these things. I've seen Tiago more like write about, it's like, oh, these are the things that I value. And I think that's what being a writer helps, is that even if you're just thinking it, like you think it and you put it on a piece of paper, it might not be a value statement, but you're reflecting back to yourself or to others. And so I guess, do you, when you've spoken to other people, I'm sure there are people that are like, most people are like, I'm so jealous, right? Like, and then there's always like, but my job won't let me, I have a sick parent or my kids, this. Could you share a bit about the conversations that you've had with people that are either aspiring to do it, and how you convince them, or the ones that are projecting about why it's a bad idea? And, so in either direction, feel free to choose.
I just want to share one thing before we dive into that.
Yep.
Years ago, we were already married and I was pregnant and didn't know I was pregnant. And we were in the Philippines visiting Tiago's Filipino side of the family. And we were sitting and we decided to write down our family values because we already knew we were trying to have kids. And so we made like a list of just like, what are our family values? And I don't even think we've looked at that list ever since we wrote it down, but it was like having that conversation and having that alignment of like, this is what we're going to choose to focus on in terms of what we want for our family. And one of them was choosing experiences over things.
Yep.
That we wanted to invest our time, our money, our energy in experiences. And we even got down to the level of like, rather than send our kids to like, I don't know, fancy private school, we'd rather take our kids to spend summers abroad where we get to go see things in person, go to the museums, visit the pyramids, do all that kind of stuff. And so we like set ourselves up for that kind of value. And I used to have the traditional job. My career was in nonprofits and in government, and it was very like local. You had to be there in person. It was not a remote work kind of environment. And it was having these values and seeing Tiago have a lifestyle with a lot more freedom that then I shifted away from that kind of work to have more of that freedom so we could have this kind of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going back to my earlier point that this started way back when of like aligning our life to live this way.
Mm-hmm. And with those conversations, right? If you're having that conversation about what are your values, without even knowing that you're having a kid, you've had it before with like, why should we get married to each other? And then you have it later of like, should we send our kids to private school and public school, right? And so like, it's not a binary, like for those listening, it's not a point in time, like we spend this weekend creating, like that's a good starting point. But you do live them over time.
Yeah.
About
absolutely.
The projection or advice. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations. It's like Lauren said, so many people have expressed admiration or like, I'd love to do the same thing or I will do the same thing. And I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is people tend to think it's like, I don't know why this is, like it's a far off end of the road achievement. Like once they have everything else figured out, once they have like plenty of money and all this money in the bank, and once my kids are through this difficult phase, and once I've paid off my car or house, it's like when they get all their ducks in a row. But that's just like generally a fantasy that never arrives.
Yeah.
And in fact, moving abroad can solve some of those things. Like I remember when we moved to Mexico City in 2019, it was a lower cost of living. And some of the money we saved from living there went to our down payment for our house in California. Right.
Crazy, yeah.
Our life here this time around is not cheaper, mostly because we are trying to maintain our household in California at the same time. But there's things like, like the fact that we have a much slower pace of life here. So we're able to go deeper on our books, spend more time and really dive deep into writing books, which then is going to result in a better book and like a better financial upside, hopefully in the future.
Yep.
So I think like there's one more example that comes to mind, which is we had this like list of home projects that probably, I don't know about your list, but my list had like over 50 things, like from like, fix the crown molding on that little thing, all the way to like create a hanging garden along the side of the wall, like projects big and small. And I hated this list because I couldn't just ignore it, because I felt like I'm a homeowner, this is my investment, and like also these things bother me, like every day. And at the same time, I didn't want to do them because I don't find them interesting. And we noticed that like by moving to Valle, I got that entire list and just archived it. It's like problem solved, at least for now.
Yeah.
It was a really intense 6 months. It was about 6 months from when we visited this town to when we moved. And we probably decided to do the move maybe about a month after visiting. So it was like 5 intense months of like having to simplify our whole lives. And one of our core family values is simplicity, like keep things simple, to the point of there's plenty of times we lose out on money because it's too complicated. We're like, that's too complicated of an investment vehicle. Like we just want to keep it simple and understand things. Like we value simplicity.
Yeah.
And we had to really simplify our lives to move here.
Yeah.
And, every year Tiago and I do our annual reviews, and we're very mindful about like where we're growing, where we want to grow. And the number one area of our life that we've thrown so many techniques and tactics at this, and we have failed miserably. Like a lot of people might see us online and see our successful business lives, but where we have failed absolutely miserably is managing a home. Like our house, so dirty, so disorganized, feeding ourselves.
I don't
like,
know about that.
So
I've been there.
Crazy. Yeah, no, like
we clean up before you come.
We clean up before people come, but like that was always like a wreck. And I've tried so many systems, so many ways of like, meal prepping or whatever. We've had meal kit services, we've had cleaners come regularly, but that area was always like a disaster because we just have like so much stuff and not enough places to put it. And then we have kids that are little and we both don't care to clean or organize. So it just was always a disaster. And I was doing my birthday reflection this year and I was like, oh my God, we finally solved the problem of the home. Like we now have this like beautiful, pristine home. And it was because we had to get rid of a ton of stuff for my sister to move in. So like I had cleared out all the closets. I got rid of so much stuff. We basically left the furniture, but like we got rid of everything. And it felt so great to simplify our lives in that way. And then like in Mexico, it is very common if you're a middle-class family to have help in your home. So we have someone who is here 5 days a week who does the cooking and the cleaning. And it is extremely affordable. And it is the biggest change to my life happiness as a new mom since becoming a mom. Like it is just the greatest thing ever. I cried my first week giving her gratitude of how she's changed my life because I have this creative freedom and energy now that is not going into picking up after the kids, figuring out what we're going to eat later and having to like start cooking before the kids get home. It's been incredible. And so like that, I think has been one of the best things to our lives is like that drastic change to our household really opened up so many things here, kind of starting fresh with a new house.
And it's like another example of what can go right? It's like, you probably knew intellectually that was available, but it's like one thing to be like, oh, we can afford to do that here. And then you think of like the reverse in the US, right? Where in the US, you're just like working to pay for childcare that like, it's usually like a bad deal. You're better off not working. And then that comes with like all the emotional labor that typically falls on the mother. And so like, my words, my interpretation, not yours, is like, like a change of scenery, just like snapped all those things into place. And maybe you knew all of that going into it, and maybe you knew some of it, but again, I love this like like what could go right, like the positive surprises of it.
Totally.
And you didn't really ask about this, but a
Yep.
topic I want to talk about is
Yes.
how like the Latino mindset and perspective, how influential and inspirational it is to us and the impact it's having on us in our well-being as well as in parenting. And we both have Latino families. We come from giant big families, and the Latino culture is very strong in my family. Like I have a very like Chicano family, and I saw myself as like so, you know, Mexican American. And then here in Mexico, I see how American I am. I'm like, whoa, I have a long way to grow into my Latino mindset, and I'm seeing the beauty of that like every day. The slowing down, the being more at peace and okay with risk. Not to say like, you know, like we have like our heavy duty car seats, and the kids here are like unstraps, like standing outside of their sunroofs as their parents are driving around the curves, and I'm like, ah. And I think a lot about like how that influence is actually helping me kind of like slow down and be more at peace and more trusting of the universe. And like Tiago said this earlier, giving up control. It's like here I am not under the illusion that I have control. It's like in the US, we try to control everything. Like our infrastructure is like hyper good. And like we try to control and prevent every bad thing from happening. And that actually uses a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Whereas like in Mexico, it's like the opposite of that. And it's a very like calming energy to just like let go of control and be like, well, así es, like power's out for 2 days. Like it's just like you just kind of go with the flow a lot more, and it feels so like freeing to be in that context.
You said it a few times of this, like, you know, fish in the water. I've only lived in America, in the United States, and so this like element of control and like the rubberized playgrounds, and I think Tiago wrote like liability waiver culture, right? When we were in Bali, there were no car seats on the island. Like it was just like a foreign concept. And I remember we took Soraya and we put her in a like baby Bjorn. She was 18 months, and we got on a moped and we just drove. Like there was no way to get from our villa to the coffee shop. Like there's no Ubers, there's no like nothing. Like it was either just stay in the house, and then they were like, if our American families saw what we're taking an 18-month-old and a baby Bjorn on a moped for like a quarter of a mile, like a straight shot driving like 5 miles an hour. And it's like, it's this weird thing where, you know, at first you're terrified. It's like you're breaking some like universal rule of like child rearing. Well, you know, there's like 15 kids on the moped next to you, like without like dangling off the exhaust pipe. And then you get there and you're like, okay, like, you know, like we were smart about this, right? Like there are certain places we wouldn't go, we wouldn't drive, you know, a certain place and all that. And there is this like rewiring that happens when you leave the United States. For us, it was like 8 weeks. And you're just like, wow, like, you know, I think of it like I listen to a lot of techno music. So like I have these headphones on, and it's just like, I'm like, yeah, this music's awesome, like bouncing up and down the street. And then I take it off. I'm like, holy shit, that was so loud. Right. It was just like, oh, like peace finally. And so I love how you're pointing that. But I wanted to ask you, Tiago, you wrote something in that post, which we'll link to. It said, I'm definitely not the first to observe it, and it saddens me a bit to do so, but I think there's something deeply broken about the US as a society now. Most people seem so disconnected from themselves and each other. Life is so work-centric, and everything else is an afterthought in comparison. Everything is a scale, a scam, and then I cut it off. But you're always being sold to. And then you wrote a few lines below, paragraphs below, the US doesn't work for me long-term because it reinforces the worst parts of my psychology, or at least the parts I'm ready to de-emphasize now. Can you say a bit more about that? Because I can relate to a lot of those kind of like the worst parts of my psychology. And you said later, you're like, it's a great place to start a business, but it's not a great place, I'm paraphrasing, to like raise a family or to be a father. Forget exactly how you said it.
Totally. Yeah, I think, I don't think people, I feel like Americans don't realize it's like the reality bubble of the US, the reality distortion field is so strong that if you are especially if you're born in the US and you stay in the US, you can really start to believe that this is just the way life is, because that's the reality bubble you're in, right? And then you're constantly also told messages like, this is the best country in the world, this is the best nation on earth. So then you think, oh well, some things are not so great, but everyone tells me this is the best. This is the best it gets, so it must be worse elsewhere, right? And I think you got to leave. And tourism is one thing, but tourism, you're also still kind of within that reality bubble. You're just in the American reality bubble in other places, right? And which is why I'm such a fan of, I've never been a fan of just like long distance travel or like backpacking. I like to go to a place and just get rooted, or at least a little bit grounded there, is because once you're integrated into the local life, that reality distortion field goes away somewhat. And you start to realize there's other ways of living. There's other ways of relating to each other. There's other ways of feeling. There's other ways of eating and sleeping and extra. Like there's many alternative ways of doing any given thing in human life, right? And often those alternative ways are healthier. They're more in natural rhythms. They're more people centric. It's like one way I describe it is like the U.S. is an achievement oriented culture. And what that means is we prioritize efficiency because we're trying to get to that, whatever the achievement is, we're trying to get there faster, right? Well, what is the number one way to increase efficiency is to remove people, right? From whatever the process is, whether it's ordering fast food in the, at the now that they have the AI screens where you just order.
Driverless cars, Waymos.
Exactly. You take out people because the greatest source of friction is people. Anytime there's two people together, they're just talking, which is reducing efficiency. And so you just remove people and you're like, this is great, until you reach a point now, which I think we're reaching, where you can go days or longer without talking to someone, especially not to a stranger. I mean, I feel like in California, I've gone weeks without talking to someone that I didn't know, someone that wasn't already a friend or family. And I really don't think we realize how bad that is for us, to not know our neighbors, to not look the person in the eye who we order food from, to not have any relationships in our own community. Like it's really toxic, and I think is a huge cause of our mental health crisis. Where then, so to set up a contrast, in Mexico, it's the opposite. Nothing works, but the way they get around nothing working is they just throw a bunch of people at it. So even if the one lane highway is broken down and it's completely stopped, which it often is, well, everyone's going to, turn off their car, they're going to get out and they're going to have a little party. There's going to be food to buy along the side of the road. They're going to be drinking. They're going to be hanging out, holding each other's babies. And so it's like the exact like flip side of that, where every, like we've talked about, every kind of problem that you encounter just becomes another opportunity to connect to people, to have a laugh, to discover something new about yourself. Like you really find these really beautiful moments in the moments of difficulty.
Do you think, question for both of you, do you think that it's been 2 months, but has a change in environment impacted your kind of achievement orientation?
I would say, well, it's funny. I feel like maybe it's because I've spent most of my life in the US. One thing I realized being here is I bring enough drive to the table by myself. I don't need, or these days want, anything in my world pushing me to be more driven. I bring 110% of that. And so what I actually need, right? What I actually need and want is the exact opposite. I want everything in my environment and all the people around me to actually be almost like brakes, to be kind of pushing back on me and kind of encouraging me to be more present and more grounded.
Yeah.
I think Tiago just painted a picture of the US that's very like black and white and negative. And being in Mexico also makes me appreciate America so much more, even the divisiveness of America. And I think the greatest thing about America is our diversity. Like I grew up in like an all Latino community, and then I moved to another neighborhood where we have like the biggest population of Vietnamese people outside of Vietnam, and I grew up with like amazing food everywhere. And it's so incredible to see like we have this divisiveness in the US because of that intermixing of values and ideas and things. And I mean, I think that's part of the success of the US. And I actually think being Latina in the US, I had a lot of that community and communal spirit because of my family. Like where we lived in Long Beach, I had a ton of cousins who lived there who were all having kids around the same age. So there's always people to like quickly like hit up and be like, hey, can I stop at your house right now? And like what I think is the incredible privilege of America is we have choice. So like the fact that we have this choice, like with no paperwork, you can come stay in Mexico for 6 months on a tourist visa. And we can travel to most places and set ourselves up pretty quickly in many new places because of our American privilege and our American citizenship. So I've really been seeing about like, how do we interplay between the strengths of different places and use those strengths to get around some of those weaknesses? So like, yes, what Tiago was pointing at is like in the US, we have to like strive more to have community, to find community, and make it exist. And here in Mexico, it's kind of like with infrastructure, efficiency, all that's not like a word that I won't leave me alone is like los tramites. Like every week we have more like paperwork we have to do related to something that needs to be handled. And you could hire people to do los tramites for you. Like there's a business here of some guy who just goes to the DMV for you, like their version of the DMV. He will handle your paperwork. And I'm like, how great is that entrepreneurship business that he started? And so there really is this like merging of cultures. And I think we get a little stuck in one mindset. And I think it's the intermixing of the mindsets and the perspectives that give us our value, that give us like that broadening of perspectives. Like there's no one whole truth. Like every country, culture, context has its strength, its benefits, its truths, as well as its drawbacks. And it's kind of noticing when something is disempowering and what do you use to get over that flip side. So I think what Tiago was speaking to is like Mexico is giving us a new kind of superpower in being more related to people, more rooted in community, that then we can add to our own personal drives of, you know, wanting to have a business and run a family a certain way.
Yeah, beautiful. I know I just keep thinking about your young kids, like what a gift to have it, you know, have lived in both cultures at, you know, under the age of 5 or 6, and then, you know, the grandparents and the community and the visiting and so on. And so it's been 2 months. Give us what's the recap? I know I'll paint a little picture, is that we were supposed to record this maybe a month and a half ago or 5 weeks ago. And it was like, we don't have internet. We're just living with candles and it's kind of chaotic. I don't know when we could do this, but so that was a month ago. What's been like, maybe I'll do it like as a speed round to be respectful of time. What's been the greatest for each of you? What's been like the biggest surprise, positive surprise, and the biggest challenge?
I think for me, it's been a surprise how long it takes us to get, how long it's taken us so far, and it continues to take us to fully establish ourselves. When we didn't have kids, it was just like, as long as I have like a place to sleep and like an internet connection, I'm fine. The kids add a whole nother level because they need their routine. They really need a routine. So like the school, and that's a whole world. How do you get them to school? You know, how do you pick them up? How do you like get the right food to them? How do you organize they have like an after school program thing? Like that's a whole world. Okay, now the car, because in a small town you need your own car. That's a whole world, because we bought the car like the third day we were here, but then you need insurance, and then you need a little fast track toll thing for the highway, and then you need to get the license plates, which we still haven't done. And it's like each area like that is its own little project and series of projects. And I'd say we're still in the midst of it. We still have a number of things we have to figure out.
Today was the first time we paid someone through like a bank to bank transfer. We've been paying everyone in cash for like months, and then we finally have our bank account set up, and we couldn't set up the bank account until we had a phone number, but you can't get a phone number with us. It's like there was always a million things like that. And I get a lot of the things in my feed and my Instagram and my TikTok. They're like, we moved our family abroad and here's how beautiful and awesome it is. I don't think people put enough out there on like the struggle it is in terms of like the sheer number of administrative things you need to figure out, as well as the like, yeah, we're used to efficiency in
Yeah.
America and like having to deal with a lot of like bureaucracy and things that just don't work. You have to like navigate all of those, but those are like the challenges we chose. Like we live on a
Yeah.
hill that is like really hard to drive up,
Oh
and
my
it's
God.
cobblestone. And during the rain, we got stuck on our hill and could not get up it. And I was so terrified to like drive up this hill. And the first time I did it by myself, I felt so proud of myself. Like it was like this
Yeah.
mega accomplishment. So each one of these like bureaucratic hurdles feels like this massive accomplishment. Like you get that high of like, we did it, we got the bank account.
Mhm.
And like it's like you're feeding that like kind of goal oriented side of us, and at the same time all those challenges are so worth it for the incredible side of things. Like before I even arrived here, the wife of the one person Tiago knew who he met at the conference here sent me a message, and she's like, anything you need, just let me know. She's like, I have a whole group of women I can't wait to introduce you to. And like since being here, every single week we have things on our calendar that are people inviting us to do things. Like we meet someone on Saturday at a birthday party, they invited us over Sunday to hang out. And that keeps happening. Like every
Wow.
week we have so many invites, social connections, chit-chatting with people on the street, and like all of that is like the joy and the beauty. And the school community has been so distinct for us compared to living abroad in Mexico before, where it was maybe we were in Mexico City, it was harder to like meet people. We were working online, remotely in English. And now just like having our kids go to school is like an instant world of people we're connected to, which has been really incredible and awesome. And so it's like kind of like you have to get through the challenging moments to
Yeah.
have these like beautiful moments as well.
That's me. This reminds me a lot. Have either of you read Donald Miller's book, A Million Miles in a Thousand Years? Sure. It's a book on storytelling, kind of, but it's like a memoir-ish. But basically, he says that, what makes life meaningful is the ability to create your own story. And it's not, you usually think of a story of like, I vanquished, David, vanquishing Goliath, selling a company or like some big challenging thing. But it's really in these like little micro moments of story, like getting the car. I having lived in Bali, all the things you're saying, it's like, so like, how do you get water into your house? Right. It's like, it took a few days and like, once you get it, you're like, yes, or the craziest thing about Bali was that they had like a mob that controlled this. There wasn't a police force. It was like a gang. And every month you would pay the gang member $20 to protect, like, but they were the nicest gang member. Like if you left your key in your moped, they would take it and like put it in an envelope and like slide it. Like they were like having like guardian angels around you. But like just the fact that you're paying off an Indonesian, like a Balinese gangster, like $20 a month to protect you. But yeah, it's this beautiful book, and I encourage all our listeners to check it out. It's like at the end of the day, we want to we want our life to have had a story. And again, it can be this great, ornate, story of heroic pursuit. But what it really is just like these like little micro moments of conflict, challenge, and overcoming them. And then when you kind of string them together over a lifetime, you've lived a life worth living. And so as I listen to you, this whole conversation, because this book's very, very, very fresh in my head, it's like, oh, it's just like, there's just a story at every point. And there's conflict, but it's, good conflict, healthy conflict. Some of it's probably extremely frustrating. And I'm sure there are times when it's like downright scary, when you're like, why the fuck why would we do this to ourselves when we could just be like driving to the mall in our Tesla? But yeah, so kudos to you, both. Well, maybe last question for either of you. If there was someone that was on the fence about doing this, do you have kind of like a pithy piece of advice for them, or the push that they might need, or the warning that they might need to heed?
This has been my theme for this year. And when I sat down to do my annual review, my goals for the year, moving to Mexico was not on my goal list at all. But my word theme for the year has been surrender.
Mm,
And it's like a daily practice here of I have to surrender. And so if you're feeling that calling, I would just say surrender to it. Just surrender to it. And there's going to be things that are hurdles, but just keep surrendering. Just keep letting go of what you think it has to look like and how it should go, and just surrender and let it unfold. And I keep thinking a lot about like gifts from the universe and just like trusting. And I do a lot of like meditating and spiritual practice to keep me grounded in surrendering and letting go of control. And I just think about how all the most amazing things here, I didn't ever set out to say, I need to find this perfect house and these friends groups. Like these things literally just like arrived. Like this house was like an accident. Like everything just keeps arriving to us because I just keep surrendering rather than trying to control and let it happen. Or force it to happen. So that would be my piece of advice, is just like surrender to what you're feeling. And if you really have that desire, if it's strong enough, will move you past the fear, will move you past like the bullshit bureaucracy. Just like keep tuning into that curiosity, that excitement.
awesome.
Chad, anything?
Gosh, I don't think I can do much better than that. I'll just add, I'll say something completely different, which relates to the conversations you and I have had, Kay, about being immigrants. And maybe this is a message, especially to those people who are immigrants to the US or are descendants of immigrants. There's a really beautiful thing about, especially if you go back to your country of origin, or to the region of your country of origin, or in a sense, even any country. It's like the opposite of immigration. In these really beautiful ways. Like your family, presumably left their country of origin and came to the US out of a sense of scarcity. You are going to a new country out of a sense of abundance.
Yeah.
They left because they had no options. You are going because you have all the options in the world. They are leaving out of fear. You are going in a spirit of exploration. It's like everything gets, you're literally taking the same action. You're moving from one place to another, and yet you get to flip all those stories on their head, and in a really wonderful way, almost like complete the cycle, or heal the cycle, or like finish the story, that it wasn't just that they suffered and then they fled. You are like completing the story, speaking of stories, and like in a sense almost fulfilling on their dream, which was to give you all the possibilities and the opportunities in the world. You're taking that, and you can even take that opportunity to return to those roots, and like, I don't know, in a sense, like return the gift back, or be the gift back to your native culture, to the people that formed your family. Like there's something, I probably have to do some writing about this, but there's something in that idea of reverse immigration that is really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can, as you're talking about that, I've been thinking about Cambodia. I'm like, oh, how do I go back and take my, my kids who are 3/8 Cambodian, my wife who's Caucasian, and me not, my parents don't want to go back. So like I'd be going without them. So yeah, it's the seed had been planted before you said that, but as you described it in that way, I was like, oh yeah, like I noticed like something, so like palpitations in my heart, like excitedly fearful ones. So I'm like, oh yeah, he's onto something there. So thank you. Well, I want to thank you both. I know you have to go pick up your kids at school. Where can we'll put this all in the description in the show notes, but where can people go learn more about both of your incredible work?
I have a Substack. I'm no longer really on social media, just Substack, laurenvaldez.substack.com.
I'm at fortelabs.com or buildingasecondbrain.com, where I'm sure you'll find whatever is going to be coming out about my new book.
Awesome. Tiago and Lauren, thank you both so much. It's been so fun.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you.